Hey everybody, welcome back to the Barry Chronicles. I ruffled some feathers last time with this video called The Children of Sin. And I should clarify, I thought I made it clear, that what I wrote and what I read to you guys was not necessarily my endorsement that I believe I was conceived through sin, but just the difficulty that a lot of children and parents have in understanding that organized religion, the two biggest religions, feel that their children are perhaps a product of sin, and that's part of the decision that they have to battle along with all the other parts that go into deciding when you're going to have a donor conceived child, what it is that's a part of their identity. And to further that, today I want to share a video called Parents' Rights versus Child's Rights, and it speaks a little bit further to this and the identity of being donor conceived. So September 2017 was close to 3.5 years ago. That's when I learned that I was donor conceived. So as you figured out, these videos are like an incomplete documentary of that experience, and not all, but a lot of it's come after, although I'll get there eventually. But it really doesn't scratch the surface with regard to what I have felt underneath or what others like me continue to feel underneath. Thousands of others like me, like my half siblings, experience this in drastically different ways. Among me and my now 7 other half siblings, there are only 2 of us who grew up knowing that we were donor conceived. That was Morgan and Thomas. The other 5 of us were raised by parents who kept it a secret. 4, including me, were first tipped off by a mail order DNA test with parents who ultimately revealed the truth after they were prodded to. And 1 who was flat out lied to even after having irrefutable evidence that disproved what they'd always been told about Dad. Dr. Jeffrey Steinberg, who was a fertility specialist in Encino, California, he estimated in 2015 that 70% of his patients would keep the truth of their child's identity a secret from them at a time when 23andMe and Ancestry.com DNA tests were already fashionable to try. It's easy to imagine that in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, most parents weren't quick to reveal to their children that they were donor conceived before they knew that they could get this information through the mail. And yet, the advent of spit in a vial, mail order DNA tests has made this long-held notion of donor anonymity a relic of the past. But it's left scores of children in its wake who have substantive questions of identity, and for many, those questions are debilitating. I am part of several virtual support groups for donor conceived children, on Facebook in particular, and it's by and large not a happy forum. People are depressed. They feel lied to by their parents and the extended family members who were complicit in hiding their identity. If who I am has been a lie my entire life, they reason, then who am I really? And how can I trust a family that would withhold such a meaningful truth? For those with families who are supportive and loving after the truth is revealed, the process seems easier, like it has been for me. But there are just as many who uncover the truth and whose families are not there for them. They want the truth buried. They don't see why it's a big deal, and they're defensive in any subsequent conversations. So it's not uncommon for families to be broken apart by these revelations, which says nothing of donor-conceived kids who feel left out of the families that raise them and in search of acceptance by their donor families are locked out of those ones too. None of this was ever part of the universally accepted, scarcely questioned norm of donor anonymity and donor rights. When sperm donation showed itself as a reasonably accessible means to start a family, both for hetero and homosexual couples, it seems that little about the child's identity was considered beyond its birth. Birth means joy. And so an entire industry was built on the nice-sounding, well-intentioned goal of giving children to deserving families. Now, within that industry was a cultural value of preserving that semblance of a normal nuclear family and using donor anonymity as an incentive to not only increase the selection pool, but to protect parents from being outed. But the impact of decades of well-intentioned decision-making on behalf of eager parents is now only rearing its ugly head really in the past 5-ish years. Not because of an ethical awakening, but because of an ethical reckoning. Anyone with $60 can get a mail order kit and find out what's behind the curtain of their identity. For better or worse, the donor world has flipped the narrative to one of a child's rights because of saliva and the UPS. And now, donor kids wonder if where they come from even matches, never mind exceeds, a donor's right to privacy. What about their privacy? Like so many other truths in our lives, unless you're in the shoes of someone who's living it, you don't know better. On the occasion that stories about donor identity reach national news, comment sections are littered with "so what" and "you're alive, I don't see what the big deal is." As someone personally living this weird, uncommon reality, I might have sided with you 3 or so years ago, largely because at the time I had no reason to believe the very building blocks of who I was would be any different. Who would? Our families are so fundamental to who we are and what we believe about ourselves that it feels foolish to indulge in an alternate universe, right? The grass isn't green, the water isn't blue. It's so beyond plausible that we wouldn't waste a minute of our time on it. And one day, the grass is red, the water's pink. Yeah, you have questions, at a minimum. But you don't have rights in most states. You should. If you're adopted, some states afford you access to medical records when you're 18, which I've addressed in the past. And if you're donor conceived, you have no clear legal rights to access your own medical history, and certainly no access to the identity of the donor. So I personally am of the mind that a donor's rights to privacy should not supersede a child's right to identity, especially when that donor's blood is running through that child's veins. I'm not endorsing an outright assault on privacy to the extent that children of donors could find out where they live or things like that, but medical records should be mandatory. A background biography on who the person is and what they look like are nice to haves, but they should at least be discussed. And no child should ever have to go through life being told that, because of the decisions of other people, they are not entitled to know the truth of who they are. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you guys again for continuing to watch, and I appreciate the level of engagement as the subject matter has gotten a little more challenging. So please leave your questions, and I look forward to responding to them and talking to you soon.